Hi and welcome back to another video. So in this video we're going to look at limiting factors and compensation points in photosynthesis, and I'll start with the limiting factors. But before, we have to know the factors that affect photosynthesis. Now if you're into agriculture, understanding these factors and how they affect photosynthesis is important, because this can help you to improve crop production. So from our equation alone you can get most of these factors. And our first factor is the concentration of carbon dioxide. So here, increase in carbon dioxide concentration increases the rate of photosynthesis. So carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere varies between 0.03% and 0.04%, but this increases due to human activities such as clearing of rainforests. Now the optimum concentration of carbon dioxide for a consistently high rate of photosynthesis is 0.1%. However, what you need to know is that the concentration above 0.05% can eventually be damaging to the plant. Our next factor is availability of water. Now, water is a raw material for photosynthesis, but it's difficult to measure its direct effect on photosynthesis. But water prevents plants from wilting due to excessive transpiration, and this would disrupt photosynthesis, since plants close their stomata in response to wilting or transpiration, and this stops carbon dioxide from diffusing from the atmosphere into the plants. So water is also important during photosynthesis. And our next factor is the chlorophyll concentration. So the only thing you need to know here is more chlorophyll, more light is trapped, and higher rates of photosynthesis, and less chlorophyll, I think that one is obvious. Then our next factor is light intensity. So increase in light intensity increases the rate of photosynthesis, but this increases the rate of photosynthesis up to a certain level. We shall get to know that when we go into limiting factors. Next is temperature, and temperature, what you need to know is that photosynthesis is an enzyme controlled process, and enzymes work efficiently in an optimum range of temperature. So when temperature is in that optimum range for enzyme activity, it can lead to an increase in the rate of photosynthesis. So with that said, let's start with limiting factors. So what you need to know is that during photosynthesis, all these factors operate simultaneously. They all work at the same time. However, at any given moment, the rate of photosynthesis is affected by only one factor. Okay, only one factor affects the rate of photosynthesis at any given moment. Now, though all factors are available, now the factor whose value is nearest its minimum value, or that factor that is in short supply, that factor is what we call the limiting factor. So a limiting factor is any factor that is in short supply and nearest its minimum value, and therefore slows down the rate of photosynthesis. So from this, what you actually need to know is the principle or the law of limiting factors, and this is the most important one, because if you remember this, it will make your understanding of this concept very easy. So the principle of limiting factors is that it states that when a physiological process is affected by more than one factor, at any given point, its rate is limited by that one factor in short supply or nearest its minimum value. When a physiological process is affected by more than one factor, at any given point, its rate is affected by that one factor in short supply and nearest its minimum value, and that factor alone. So next we shall take light intensity as an example of a limiting factor as we study this graph. So I hope that is clear. Now from this graph you can see there's region A, B and C. So in region A, light intensity is a limiting factor. So what this means is that in region A, no matter how much carbon dioxide concentration or temperature or any other factor, no matter how much you raise or lower them, there will be no change in the rate of photosynthesis, because light intensity alone determines the rate of photosynthesis in region A. So in this region, only increasing light intensity can increase the rate of photosynthesis, but this can occur up to a certain level, and this is where region B comes in. So now in region B, some other factor other than light intensity is becoming a limiting factor. So here, light intensity and some other factor, maybe carbon dioxide concentration or temperature, is becoming the limiting factor. So here, as light intensity increases, there reaches a point where any further increase in light intensity has no effect on the rate of photosynthesis. So carbon dioxide or temperature or any other factor is too low to sustain photosynthesis. So here light intensity and another factor are limiting factors. And then finally we have region C. Now in region C, light intensity is no longer a limiting factor. Now here some other factor, let's say carbon dioxide concentration is now a limiting factor, and only an increase in its concentration will increase the rate of photosynthesis. So if carbon dioxide concentration is now the limiting factor here, increasing light won't help to increase the rate of photosynthesis. However, increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide, since it's a limiting factor, increasing its concentration will increase the rate of photosynthesis up to a certain point. Then some other factor, maybe temperature, now will also become a limiting factor. So that's how this concept of limiting factor works. So that is what you need to know on limiting factors. As long as you remember the principle of limiting factors, you really have no problem here. If you don't get it, you actually have no choice. You just have to get it. I hope that one is clear. Now we can turn our attention to compensation points, and what you need to know here, as I'm sure we all know that that oxygen is released and glucose is produced during photosynthesis, and that oxygen and glucose are used by the same plant during respiration to generate ATP for so many other plant activities. So from this graph, you can see that as light intensity is gradually increased from 0, the rate of photosynthesis increases and more carbon dioxide is absorbed by the plant, and oxygen and glucose are also made during photosynthesis, and these are used by the same plant during respiration, and therefore the rate of respiration also increases. Now during respiration, carbon dioxide is released, and this carbon dioxide is then reabsorbed by the plant to be used in photosynthesis. So you realize that respiration and photosynthesis are taking place at the same time, but there comes a point when the rate of photosynthesis and the rate of respiration exactly balance each other. So here there is no net exchange of oxygen or carbon dioxide, and this is what we call the compensation point. But since it depends on light in this example, we shall call it the light compensation point. So this is the point when carbon dioxide released or glucose used during respiration is equal to the carbon dioxide absorbed and the glucose produced during photosynthesis. Now what happens beyond 0 going up? I've already talked about it under limiting factors. Now the light compensation point varies for different plants, and those are categorized into the sun plants and shade plants, and that's what I'll briefly talk about. Okay, now I'll start with sun plants. Now when I say sun plants, I'm not talking about sunflowers. I'm talking about sun plants, and these include the best example I can use is trees, because these are always exposed to high light intensities. So what you need to know about sun plants is that these have a high light compensation point, so they require more light before photosynthesis can exceed respiration. Now sun plants have a high light compensation point, and this allows them to survive in environments where light intensity is high, since they require higher amounts of sunlight to photosynthesize. Now sun plants therefore exploit these high light intensities to maintain high photosynthetic rates. Therefore, their high light compensation points allow these plants to function efficiently higher intense light conditions. Now sun plants have also adaptations that enable them to survive in areas of high light intensities, and these include they have small leaves which reduce the surface area for transpiration. They also have leaves with thick waxy cuticles, and this also helps to reduce transpiration and so many other adaptations. Now we can turn our attention to shade plants. Now shade plants, there are many examples of shade plants, and these are normally found under some kind of tree canopy. So they're exposed to very low light intensities, and the best example I can give is ferns. I hope you can see them now. Shade plants have a low light compensation point, and this means that they require only a small amount of light before photosynthesis can exceed respiration. Now ferns and other shade plants are found under forest canopies, where only a small amount of light can reach them. However, due to their low light compensation points, shade plants are able to exploit these small amounts of sunlight and maintain high photosynthetic rates, and this allows them to survive in in environments where some plants cannot. Now they also have other adaptations such as large and broad leaves. These increase the surface area for sunlight to be trapped by chlorophyll. They also have thin leaves to to ease light penetration. They also have a high chlorophyll density in their leaves, and that enables them to capture enough sunlight. So that's how they exploit these areas with low light intensities. I hope that is clear, and that is what you need to know. But as always, I encourage you to read and research for yourself, because that is where the real gain comes from. Now, with that said, subscribe. Please subscribe, like the video, and subscribe again, and share it as many times as you can. And I'll see you in my next video. Thank you for watching.